So that's us. And as for any meeting we hold, we'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We have a tight affiliation, and it's growing with our fire awareness with our Indigenous First Nations people. So we've got a tight tie in there, and hopefully that gets stronger as we go through. As mentioned, this is a webinar format, so it's going to be recorded and available to the local brigade for people who have missed out. So as such, we don't have any pictures or speaking components for the participants, and that's basically to just ensure your privacy, and as it will go out publicly. So unfortunately, people will get to see me, but we like to respect the privacy of our participants. So we'll run a little poll shortly. They're optional, but we certainly encourage people to get involved. And certainly it's just about how long you've lived in the area and so forth, just to give us a bit of a picture as to what our audience and participants are doing. So keep going with that. So the poll's up now. Just really keen to understand how long have you lived in the area? What's your knowledge around fire? So have you attended a CFA meeting before and learned something? Have you come back for more? Is this the first time? Give that a minute just to, yep, the answers are flooding in now. Okay, yep, looks like we got a bit of a split with who have attended CFA meetings. Brilliant. Callum, can you just, we might finish that and show the results. Fantastic. So, yeah, but that's quite a mix. Okay, we've got a few there who have been here for a year, so welcome to the area. It's a beautiful part of the world to live in. We've got a number, obviously, that 5 to 10 and 10 plus years. So of those people, you would have had some fire experience in the environment, and may have experienced some situations over the last number of years. So that will be that you always learn from that. Okay, some people got some very high knowledge, a couple of people there, and very low. So that's a good combination. Wonderful. Yeah, and almost a bit of a split on who's attended. So we certainly encourage people who attend CFA meetings. We're fearful that people come to one meeting and this is all they do and they'll never come to another one. But I certainly encourage that every couple of years you get to a CFA meeting, whether it's at the fire station or now online. We provide different presenters. There can be updates on information, but typically the presenters will offer little tidbits. Everyone's different and you'll take away something. So it's always good to just refresh the memory. So that's brilliant. All right, thanks, Callum. We'll drop that. So this evening we'll do, as I said, it's very much an overview. So it's a fire safety essential meeting. So it's a bit of an overview of your local risk, what to expect, personal protection, warnings and alerts and things like that. We do have other sessions that are a bit more involved. If from today you've got further, you want to increase that knowledge base or have further questions, keep an eye out for CFA bushfire planning workshops. So they go more in depth about the fire behaviour and safe personal safety and survival and things like that. So it's a more in-depth session. Further, and then our pinnacle program is the Community Fire Guard program, which you undertake 5 to 6 core program sessions, and they're in depth. So we'll spend 2 hours just talking about fire behaviour as an example, and then we might, and at the end of that we have a written plan. So there's a couple of options there. So tonight, bit of an overview, just to get that thought provocation. How are you finding out about fires? Let's get some key steps going about your planning and decision making, and some of the factors around that decision making. So, and then if plans A, B, C, D, and E have all failed, and you're down to plan Z, what are your options? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, understanding the local fire risks. Well, typically we live in a fantastic environment. Warrandyte is a spectacular part of Victoria, and with it comes the risk of fire and storm in some cases. We love living where we are, and we wouldn't change it. So, but what we need to understand is that, and I touched on it earlier, in the Warrandyte environment, if we do get fire starting in the environment or encroaching into the environment, it's going to be a really, really fast and dynamic event. We had a fire in 2014 in Warrandyte, and as I said, we were starting to lose homes within 400 to 500 meters of the ignition source, and that was within minutes of the fire starting. So it will be a rapid event. Maybe in the chat, I'd be keen to understand if anyone could tell me what sort of landscape you have to the north of Warrandyte. Be keen to see what responses we have there. So understanding where we sit in Warrandyte, we are part of the Central Fire District. So all our warnings and total fire bans are based on that Central Fire District. So really important to understand where you're situated. Also, if you're travelling over Christmas, the coming holidays and so forth around the state, keep this map in mind. Look, download our brochures and so forth. Have an understanding where you're travelling. So today, from the Mallee, and I think it was the Wimmera district where it had total fire bans, it's really important if you're travelling. We understand, okay, we live in Central, but what are we doing when we're holidaying? So we need to be mindful of what our alerts are. The difficulty, and this comes up regularly, the difficulty we have with our Central district when we're identifying total fire ban days, severe, extreme, and so forth, is that it's based from everything from Lorne, as you can see on the map here, up to Ballarat, across the Pakenham, and down to the Phillip Island, Bass Coast sort of area. So it's a massive area, and there will be times where you might scratch your head and think, why are we in a total fire ban day today? Or why is it severe or extreme? We're not really seeing those conditions. It can come as a result of, there might be significant grass fire risk for that day out in the west, and that's activated the central plan. So you still got to have an understanding of what your local environment is doing and what it's feeling like, and that all comes back to your own planning too. So, and I'll talk about your gut feeling, understanding bad fire days, and you may make decisions based on severe, extreme, and so forth. But also trust your gut. Okay, so, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit later on. I certainly would imagine that our longer term residents have, you get that spider senses. You get that feeling in the morning. The wind picks up. It's dry. It's warm, and you just get that sense that, oh, it's not a good day today. So, and for the newer residents here, it won't take long. It won't take many hot days for you to appreciate that feeling. So as we continue, we can breathe easy a little bit. So the predicted weather forecast for this summer is that we are in a La Nina event. So effectively, we're looking at average to above average rainfall. So the brief summer that we've had at the moment, where we've had we get a few warm days into the low 30s, finished up with a thunderstorm and maybe some heavy rains. That seems to be what the pattern will be for the summer. So from a bushfire perspective, we can probably breathe a little bit easier. It was similar to last season. We only, I'm out in Yarra Ranges, but we only had a I think it was a 5 to 6 week fire danger period. So it was a very limited, short summer. What I do say though is that people ask, when will we have a bushfire season? And I always say yes. Um, and what we find is that we may be wet, we may be damp, but we only need, in late January into February, we might suffer that a period where we get 5, 6, 7 days of warm, dry weather, and it's just enough to dry out the surface fuels and debris and litter that's laying around the environment. And if fire starts in that environment, it can move and be a problem. Probably won't get the all-encompassing big fire as such. The surface moisture will still be there. There will be residual moisture in the environment. So just keep that in mind. What I do refer back to is these seasons, this last couple of summers, and this one coming, reminds me of the 1997 summer up in Mount Dandenong. It was quite a damp season, and right through to mid-January, it was green over the hill. It was quite damp, and the environment was still green. But we just had, around mid-January onwards, we had that run of hot days. Surface fuel did dry out, and we ended up having a decent fire up in Mount Dandenong. It was deliberately lit, so there was a few points of ignition that helped that along. But the end result was that we did have a fire in a dampish environment, and we lost, I think it was around 45 homes and 3 lives. So it can come up and sneak up on us. So this summer, we're really looking at the grass fire risk is going to be what our major concern will be for summer. And we probably all know that with our lawn mowing at the moment. We mow it 1 week, and 10 days later it needs doing again. And that's certainly what's going to catch us out to our north and out to our west particularly. But even at a local level through the Yarra Valley, even in paddocks to your south, Stinton's Road, Falconer Road, places like that, you've got a little bit of, you've got some paddocks and grasslands there. So the concern is that we have rain, it gets long, and we have a burst of dry weather, and suddenly it browns out very quickly, and it will carry fire quite rapidly into the environment. So grass fires will be the one to watch for this summer. Callum, just for your interest, I with my screen on, I can't see the chat, so if there's anything pertinent, just feel free to jump in and let me know.
No problem at all.
Thanks, mate. Local vegetation, well, you've got it all where you are. So it's, I think pretty much you can stand in Main Street, Warrandyte, and do a 360-degree lookout, and you've got greenery. You've got dry forest, riparian forest through the river, to the north, dry forests. So you've got vegetation all around you. So it's, I mentioned earlier what's to your north, and North Warrandyte, and we talk about. We'll touch on it in a minute, but the fast-moving fire developing from the north, strong north winds coming down into Warrandyte, but also got the Warrandyte State Park to your south. So in an odd position, or if there's a fire in the environment and you get that wind change that starts blowing from the south, and there's fire in the environment, once again in that Falconer, Tyndall's, Stinton's Road sort of area, that may carry up towards the township. So so be mindful, completely 360-degree environment with the vegetation. Local risks, might be a couple of photos there that can bring back some thoughts. I'm not sure if any of the participants were here on that Sunday back into, I think it was 9th of February 2014. I only know that because it was my father-in-law's birthday, and we'd been out, and I could see the fire burning in the distance. So Warrandyte has a very rich fire history. For the past 100 years, over the decades, it's got a very dynamic and rich fire history. But where we have this beautiful environment that we live in, amongst the trees, we've also got a lot of homes dotted in between. So the one that always strikes me whenever there's a fire event, certainly living on Mount Dandenong for all those years, it's that picture right in the middle at the top. When the balloon goes up and fire is impacting the town or nearby to the town, what's your road network like? It's a rabbit warren throughout Warrandyte. So you've got little dirt tracks, little roadways, very limited in and out. And from a CFA perspective, that picture at the top is our worst nightmare. So I've had experiences. Did a session the other night, and a lady was saying that when Birdslands went up, she was one of that 80%. She decided to get in the car and go, and pulled out onto the Burwood Highway in Belgrave, and it was banked up, and there was people with horse floats, caravans connected. They packed their entire houses up, waiting for something to happen, and then everybody left at the same time, and then you get that traffic jam, people banking up. Particularly important for us in our debrief of the fires from 2014 was everybody trying to escape, all the local residents trying to get out in these narrow streets and neighbourhoods, and it actually really hindered us trying to get in. So it actually slowed our response, trying to get into these neighbourhoods and start protecting homes and so forth. So these narrow roads full of cars, we're trying to get big fire trucks up. It's a nightmare, a really bad situation. So as I mentioned right at the start, that thought about leaving early has to be early, not when the fire started. Okay. Quick snapshot. You've got around 2,000 properties in Warrandyte, population of just over 5,500 people. So that's a lot of people. And you've got about 4 fire trucks. Okay, so we will get support in. You've got South Warrandyte, you've got brigades nearby, but in the initial stages of a fire starting to take hold, you may only have 10, 15 trucks there in that immediate first 20 minutes or so. We will throw everything we can at it, but it takes a while to start getting our strike teams and start getting, trucks coming from Roval and Hillsville and places like that. It takes time to get in. So we just need people to be mindful that if we've got a fire starting in and around the Warrandyte area, there's 2,000 homes, schools, nursing homes, critical infrastructure and things like that. So where do we go? Well, we try and tackle the fire front first. Our biggest impact is to tackle the fire front throw everything we can at it at the start and try and bring it under control. Once it starts getting away, we will focus on houses and house protection and stuff like that. But you can just see the numbers there. We can't be everywhere. So it does come back to some self-reliance of our community members, maintaining properties and houses. As a firefighter myself, if I'm going down a street and there's fire in the environment and I've got to pick a house to save if the fire's impacting a street, and I've got house A that's overgrown, no maintenance, trees over the house and so forth, and then next door they've done the property maintenance, clean lawns, trim the vegetation and so forth, my efforts and energy will go onto the house that's been prepared because we have limited water, and that's just how the decision making will go. So so they're all little things, once again, just to keep in the back of your mind about what you're doing with property maintenance and so forth. Okay, what to expect from a fire? There may be people here who have had experience, and all I can say is it's horrible. 30 odd years I've been around long enough to be involved in a few. It is quick, it's dynamic. We all know it's going to be hot weather, hot conditions. It's going to be smoky. Probably most recently, we've seen that footage down at down Malakuta Way, where literally daytime turns to night. So the smoke is thick, it's nasty, it's hard to breathe. You've got embers and debris flying through the air. But what comes out of, for most people, and for myself and when I experienced my first big bushfire impacting houses was the noise. It makes a noise. It's loud. When you start impacting houses, you hear car tires popping, gas cylinders venting, and so forth. So there's a lot of noise that comes with it. And I need people to be prepared for that, because no matter what your decision is, I've spoken to survivors who said they had really strong plans, well-written plans, but once the noise came through, they threw the plan out the door, jumped in the car, panicked, and so forth. So that's a real trigger for panic. So just keep that in mind. We see the footage on TV, but truly understanding the noise that comes with it, it's quite horrific. Callum's going to show a video in a second. I'm pretty sure this one's about is Ember Attack. I'm just going to jump forward again. Yes, it's Ember Attack. So if we've got any anybody who's a bit uncomfortable, or young children, it might be time just to take a quick breather. It only goes for a couple of minutes. It really highlights, and Warrandyte's a classic example of what you could expect from what we call Ember Attack. And look, I'll get Callum to. Are you right to play that, Callum?
Yep, good to go.
Yep. So I'll get Callum to put that on, and it's pretty self-explanatory, and we'll have a few comments after that. So, all right, thanks, mate.
During a bushfire, embers will reach your home long before the flames do. Ember attacks are the most common way that houses catch fire. Embers are burning leaves, twigs, and pieces of bark. They help the bushfire spread by starting spot fires ahead of the main fire front. Short-distance ember attacks happen when leaves and small pieces of bark are blown from burning trees. The intense shower of sparks that forms fills the air with hot, burning embers, which will land on nearby vegetation and properties. The hot embers can easily land and get into your clothes and burn your skin, eyes, and airways. Small fires will start all around you and quickly become uncontrollable. The resulting chaos creates confusion as the fire seems to come from many directions, meaning it will be difficult to make good decisions about your safety. The experience will be physically exhausting and emotionally traumatic. Long-distance ember attack is caused by large bushfires that generate intense heat. As the hot air rises, it forms a column of smoke that sucks in air like a vacuum, increasing the intensity of the fire. The updraft in the column lifts embers, like large pieces of burning ribbon bark, hundreds of metres into the air, where strong winds can carry them many kilometres beyond the fire front. On Black Saturday, embers travelled more than 30 kilometres ahead of the main fire. When these embers land, they often start fires where leaves naturally accumulate, like in gutters, doorways, and garden beds. So, while you might think you're safe when a bushfire is far away, embers can fall from the sky and land around your home long before you even know there's a fire. But remember, your home isn't the only thing under threat during an ember attack. By the time you realise the danger, it might be too late as escape routes become jammed. Embers can also start fires on roads and block them completely, making late evacuation dangerous or impossible. That's why leaving early, before a fire starts, is always your safest option.
Oops. There we go. Okay, so look, it's quite a striking animation, and look, the overwhelming concern for Warrandyte is something starting to your north. You know, we've got that We've had that run of hot days. We've got this what we call our spike day. So, you know, a typical summer's week, we'll have temperatures in the high 20s, low 30s. Then maybe day 5 or so, you might see it spike into 37, 40 degrees. And then the following day, it's back into the 20s. So it's at that last day that we're really concerned about. And effectively, it's the high pressure system being pushed over by the cold pressure system, low pressure. And it's that last day. So the winds are coming early on in the day. They're coming from the centre of Australia, from the north, quite rapidly at the end of that high pressure system. If something happens to your north and a fire starts and starts developing, then what you saw there is an absolutely realistic proposition for Warrandyte and surrounds. Where initially it might be one of black leaves landing. It'll be smoke first, black leaves, burnt leaves. Then you might start getting sparks, you know, the odd spark and ember landing around, and certainly then as the fire front gets closer and closer every kilometre, it become more and more, and certainly as the fire front nears you, so it gets in within sort of 1 or 2 kilometres, you will start getting lots of embers landing around. A lot of my time was spent, as I said, I lived up on the hill, but a lot of my time was spent at Montrose CFA as a volunteer. And part of our planning and concerns was that Warrandyte sits to the northeast of us out at Montrose, and our concerns were that if you had a big fire developing and breaking into the atmosphere with strong northeast winds, then that front face where the TV towers are on Mandandenong will almost be like a catcher's mitten for embers. So a real concern for us was them travelling 15, 20, even up to 30 kilometres in extreme cases. So a fire in Warrandyte was a real concern for us around, you know, Montrose, the basin, that sort of area. So be mindful of that. Ember attack historically has shown that nearly just over 80% of all the homes destroyed in bushfires is through ember attack. So it is literally embers finding all the nooks and crannies around the house, the doormats, the coconut husk doormats. It might be the coconut husk planters that are hanging under eaves and so forth, mulch in and around the garden and so forth, and then obviously penetrating into the house through gaps under floorboards and so forth. So embers are the biggest killer of homes. The easiest answer I can put to that is we want to try and spark proof our homes. Okay, have a look in your ceiling paste if you've got pitched roofs. Certainly after the year we've had with storms and earthquakes and so forth, it probably wouldn't hurt to check into your ceiling space. If you can see any light coming through, you might have damaged tiles, corrugated sheets might have flapped up, and it's allowing leaves and things to land in. So it's well worth having a look. Occasionally you might get possums in the roof, so if they're getting in, there's probably a way that sparks can get in as well. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so embers destroy homes. The next one is, I'll get Callum to put up shortly, is radiant heat. So embers kill homes, radiant heat kills people. So once again, this is quite a striking animation. So if you've got any young ones, or you've just had dinner and get a bit queasy, this one's probably worth just tuning out of. Goes for a couple of minutes, and we'll get that playing. Thanks, Callum.
Victoria is one of the most bushfire-prone parts of the world. Every summer, bushfires threaten properties and lives. But did you know it's not the flames that kill most bushfire victims? No, it's the radiant heat. Most victims die from the effects of radiant heat long before they're reached by the flames. Radiant heat is what you feel when you sit next to a campfire. If a campfire heats up to 2 kilowatts per square metre, you'll feel that it's too hot and will want to move back from the fire. If you don't, this amount of radiant heat is enough to cause burns and blisters in as little as 40 seconds. At 12 kilowatts, it can cause some materials, like dry timber, to ignite. A bushfire can reach 100 kilowatts, and the effects can be truly catastrophic. For humans, radiant heat can cause burns from 100 meters away and cause a dangerous increase in body temperature. Radiant heat can cause the rapid onset of heat stroke. Heat stroke damages your brain, meaning you won't be able to concentrate to make good decisions as the fire arrives. Other impacts include severe damage of internal organs and death. There are some things you can do if you're caught in a fire. Cover your skin with long-sleeved, natural fibre clothing, like wool. It's also useful to know that radiant heat only travels in straight lines and can't bend around corners. So, sheltering behind or inside solid structures may help protect you. But be aware, radiant heat will travel straight through glass. The best defense against radiant heat is a simple one. If you're not anywhere near a bushfire, its radiant heat can't hurt you. Leaving early is always your safest option.
Okay, so that's once again quite a active animation there. Radiant heat, sorry, I'll go back a step. When we have fire in vegetation, as a general rule of thumb, for every metre of height in vegetation, we can expect 3 to 4 times flame height. Okay, so if you look at in and around your surrounds and around your property, just be mindful if that vegetation catches, you can be looking at 3 to 4 times the height of the actual plant or vegetation from a flame height perspective. They mentioned the language there that radiant heat can be fatal up to 100 or so meters away. So, and that's when we're talking, you know, ground level vegetation through to mid level into the crowns where you've got this wall of fire effectively. So, which quite happens near national parks and areas like that that are very heavy in vegetation. So keep that in mind from a perspective of, you know, when we always see it, the video of the guy standing on his roof with the hose and the safety sandals, shorts and a you know, singlet on, trying to protect his house. They're not going to last long. Okay, that radiant heat is going to knock the wind out of him very, very quickly. If you're all dressed up and prepared and protected, if you're in that situation, it will buy you more time where you can actively defend and put out embers and so forth. You can stay out longer, but if you're not wearing the right gear, you're not going to last long. What I do say to, I'll touch on it a bit later, actually. So solid structures, if all else fails, it's too hot in the environment, solid structures will protect you. As we can see here on this picture here, I want to dispel the myth, and the media do it all the time, and it's what people recollect from bushfires. But the media will say, the fire came through my property and my house burst into flame. It exploded. What that explosion is, what they're seeing is any house, whether it's weatherboard, brick veneer, and so forth, will absorb a massive amount of this radiant heat. Okay, so weatherboards and things like this picture that we're sort of seeing here, it will absorb heaps of hundreds of degrees of temperature. But eventually what will happen, several minutes down the track, everything that's flammable will reach its ignition point and then burst into flames. So that's the explosion that people are talking about. But it may take 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes for all those flammable items to burst into flame. In the meantime, that house is protecting you from those, you know, the hundreds of degrees of temperature outside. So it is really not an option to be caught out on foot in a bushfire event. let alone a car. Car only offers about 3% more chance of survival than being out on foot. So they're not good options. So just keep that in mind. But then we talk about, once the house does start to catch fire, then we'll talk about it in a minute. But you've got to have an escape plan and so forth. So that's a little bit of understanding about radiant heat. They also touched on heat stroke. So keep your fluids up. So, we get the 7-day forecast. We know that in 5 days' time, we're going to have a really hot, stinking day. Could be a bad fire day. Get your fluids up the night before. So the afternoon before, the night before, get your fluids up. Keep drinking. So, because I always say, even if your plan is to leave early, you've still got to account for that one day that everything goes belly up and you're stuck and you might have to fight for your life. So heat stroke and heat stress, there's lots of firefighters fall down from it. We don't get enough fluids. We work hard. We're dressed up, and it's debilitating. You can't make wise decisions. You can't process things once that heat stress starts kicking in. So keep your fluids up and be mindful of that. All right. There's just a couple of statements from some locals who have, unfortunately we've had some significant case stories over the years since 2009, and no doubt we'll update these presentations with more stories from Malakuta and the fires and so forth. So, but you just have a quick look at those. It's the one there, Mick, at the bottom right. That's how I like to describe ember attack. So if you can imagine the last big hailstorm you've had, where you look outside and you've got sort of a centimetre or two of white laying all over the deck and the front yard and so forth. It looks great when it's hail, but if you can transform that into burning embers and just having a layer of thousands of burning embers laying around the property, that's what significant ember attack looks like. And for this one here, it's just a couple of comments, just about people's decision making and their thoughts after being affected by fire. Callum, are you right to run that?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks.
Just want to get the videos right. Phil, do you want
right.
the I'll never do that again?
Yeah, that one would be good. Thanks. Once again, these are all just thought provocations. People who have lived and breathed fire situations and got through it. So.
10 years ago, when all the dams were full and the tanks were full and there was plenty of water, I probably would have stayed and I would have died.
Nothing went the way we might have anticipated.
Whatever preparations you put into place, you only need something small to go wrong.
In future, I don't think we'd want to put the kids through that sort of trauma, I guess. Yeah, wouldn't put the kids through that again.
If it was my choice, I wouldn't stay again. If we had another day like that, if I had the opportunity to get out, I would go before the fire even got here.
So the second gentleman there, Steve Pascoe, was one of CFA's first community fire guard presenters. Well planned, well versed in fire safety, and I can't remember whether he was Strathmore. I can't quite remember where he lived. Had prepared his property, but it still didn't go to plan. The pump failed, I believe, and then suddenly was in a world of hurt. They survived, but if you've got to have those preparations to survive the event. If you're caught short, we can't reiterate enough about that leaving early option. I've spoken to too many survivors who have survived the event, but the trauma and so forth that's carried along with it, as we saw a couple of snapshots there where people just saying, not again, no way, not a chance. And if it is a decision, an active decision about staying and defending the property, that's a whole nother lesson just about, and comes with some real serious decisions about capability, fitness, psychological ability, equipment. So, you know, having pumps and tanks and sprinklers and so forth. It's a big business to make that decision to actively stay and defend. So so just keep that in mind. We have insurances for a reason. Yeah, we can't reiterate about leaving early enough. So we've touched on a couple of these things already. It's stressful, it's traumatic, it's dynamic, it's hot, it's stinky, it's smoky, it's noisy. Trees are coming down, power lines are coming down, exit roads. Well, we've discussed that in Warrandyte. Okay, on a typical nice sunny Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon through Warrandyte, trying to make movement is difficult, just with the tourist flow and so forth. So chuck fire into the environment, and with that being a bad fire day, we've got strong winds. So we're starting to have branches down, so trees down and so forth. So you think about then trying to get out of the township at that late notice. It will be diabolical. The ember attack, yep, causes fires to spread quickly. So they will, as we saw in that animation, fire will run ahead of itself and spot fires will break out. And certainly another aspect about leaving late is that, yes, you might know North Warrandyte's burning well, we've got embers starting to land all around us, we're getting out of here. But what if that's created a spot fire ahead of your exit, and suddenly you're trapped between two fires? So so there's a whole range of issues that can come into that decision making. So just keep that in mind. It's a thought provocation. How do you know if there's a fire? What tools and what resources are we using to understand what's happening in our environment? Be really keen for people to put things into the chat if you don't mind. What are we using? What's out there? What tools do we have to understand if there's fire in the environment? I'll keep going through, but so while people maybe pop a couple of those into the chat, I'll have a quick chat about the fire danger ratings. I think there's a slide coming up, but I'm going to say it now. The fire danger rating, so when we're talking very high, severe, extreme, code red, it is not about the likelihood of a fire starting. Okay, you need to make that really clear. An extreme day doesn't say that there's an extreme chance of fire starting. Okay, what it is, it's the science of when a fire does start and how it's going to impact us in the environment. It's really important to read. So go away, have a look at our downloads, our information, but have a read of what the science is behind the fire danger ratings. The wording is slightly different on a couple of them. Okay. The first thing I'll say, what I'll do, sorry, I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat here. Vic Emergency apps, we've got radio, TV weather, yep, awesome. Vic Emergency app people are using, wonderful, that's great. So I'll go back to one thing here, code red days. That was our Black Saturday day. That is a day where all bets are off. It's a day where we say that even the best built houses that are built to bushfire regulations, the bets are off. There's no guarantees that you will survive that. What I'm really fearful of in CFA is that after 2009, and we've used this language, code red or catastrophic day, that becomes people's focus. Okay, their planning might be based around the code red. Since 2009, when this scheme, this fire danger rating platform was established, has anybody got any ideas as to how many code red days we've had in our central fire district area? I'll let you hang on to that if you want to pop that into the chat. If you've got any thoughts on how many code red days we've had in our area, I'd be really keen to understand what your knowledge is on that. Going back to the fire danger rating, while we wait for those, we really need to pull away from the code red and think about the severe and the extreme days. Now, I want you to study the wording on these. On a severe day, if a fire starts and breaks out in your area, in your environment, and the fire brigade respond and local resources can't get on top of it in that first 20, 30, 40 minutes, and it's moving, then the language says that fire, and the science says that fire may be uncontrollable. So what it's saying practically is that as a fire service, we're throwing the kitchen sink at it. We're doing everything we can to try and pull that fire front up on a severe day. That's the science. In that same scenario, on an extreme fire day, the science is telling us that if a fire starts and takes hold in that environment, and we as a fire service can't get on top of it quickly, it will be uncontrollable. So it's gone from may in severe to will be in extreme, and it will be uncontrollable. What that means is that there's nothing we can do. Doesn't mean we pack up and go home, but we will throw everything at it, but there's nothing we can do to impact the fire front. So what we will do, we will then look at asset protection, protecting life and property and nursing homes and schools and asset protection and things like that. To stop that actual fire front, we either need divine intervention, so rain, or we're looking at prolonged forward planning with backburning exercises and things like that. So it's that's the difference, and that's the understanding we need to have. I'm just going to jump into the chat quickly just to see if anyone got an answer. Okay, yeah, Virginia, you get the bickies tonight. And Diana Brown, yeah, that's a great answer. So we actually haven't had any code red days in the Central District area since 2009. Okay, so I really want people's mindset to pull away from that day. We know it's going to be a horrible day. You're not going to miss it. Okay, it's a terrifyingly nasty day. Make your plans around very high, severe, and extreme. Typically, on a typical summer, and this is won't be a typical summer. A typical summer may see us have half a dozen or so severe days, and then maybe 2 or 3 into the extreme. Okay, so overall, what I say to our community members, I hope you can't hear my dog barking. I apologise if you can. What I say to our community members that in a typical summer, there may be 10 days a year that we need to think about fire. We've got to plan for it. We've got to have that consideration. The brutal person in me, and some people will fight that and challenge that and say it's all too difficult. My answer to them, and it's brutal, is that in a typical summer, if you can't be prepared and plan around 8 to 10 days and thinking about fire in your environment, then you probably shouldn't be living there. Okay, that's quite brutal. But that's the reality. We live in these beautiful environments, and it comes with a risk. What I want to do about this summer and touch on is I talked briefly about the fire in Mount Dandenong in '97 when it was a wetter summer. It was started by an arsonist, and there was 5 or 6 points of ignition across the hill, so it had help. But that day, where we lost around 45 homes and 3 lives, that fire only occurred at the top end of very high, nudging into severe. So that's the mindset. Don't just think it's a very high day, we've got nothing to worry about. You've still got to have an awareness, okay? We can still get fire moving in the environment. That fire had help, but, there are idiots out there who may, this stuff happens. So we've got to plan for that. The other point I'd like to highlight on the fire danger rating for particularly you in Warrandyte is that the fire that occurred back in 2014, if there's any residents who remember, is that we advertised that as being a severe day. So typically on our apps and the CFA website and the newspapers and so forth, you get around 3 days notice as to what fire weather we'll be looking at. So in the lead up to this Sunday, it was advertised as severe. But weather, being weather, on that Sunday morning, and this was a particularly odd day. I'd never, to be honest, had experienced this in my fire history in 20 odd years at that stage. about 10:30, 11ish, I think from memory, that severe day actually spiked well into the extreme. So just have that mindset that if we say it's advertising that it's severe, it's a living document. It's a living status. So it can change during the day. And on that particular Sunday, it went from severe and spiked right into the extreme. The winds just kicked up. It was swirling. The heat spiked more than predicted. So what that leads me to tell you as an audience is trust your gut instinct. Trust your natural abilities of, you know, your plan might be to just leave on extreme, but stay on the other days as an example. But if your decision is to stay on severe, but you go out at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon and so forth, and your gut instinct is saying, oh, I don't like this. This wind's a bit hot. It's hotter. The wind's picking up a bit more, whatever. Back yourself and leave. Make your decision to leave early. Enact your extreme plan. Okay, I'm really keen for people to still trust in their the natural ability and their senses. Just jumping into the chat again quickly. Yeah, so okay, Rachel. So leaving early. It has to be before the first fire is the spark is struck. So Warrandyte was once again another an example for us that I talked about the 80% of people who are going to wait and see what happens, and that's fine if you know that the fire has started 20 or 30 kilometers away, the first fire of the day. You might have time to get your things together and leave. Okay. The risk you take though is that if it's 30 k's away, you might be safe and be able to get out of town. But if that fire starts 500 meters, a kilometer away, it may be too late to leave, and suddenly your plan to leave is out the window. And this is exactly what had happened at Warrandyte. So a house that was lost, the family, their plan was to leave. Their car was packed with all their belongings and goods. They had that mentality of, yeah, we're going to get out of here. But the fire literally started 400 or 500 meters away, and within, I think it was literally sort of 4 or 5 minutes of the fire starting, their house was starting to burn. So that's what we talk about when we leave. We want to leave early. In Victoria, typically the hottest part of the day and when fires start is after that 11, 12 o'clock. It's into the afternoon. So we certainly encourage people, if they're looking at leaving early, to do so in the morning. If we're talking extreme or certainly code red, we then go a step further and say, look, you might even want to consider leaving the night before. So this all comes back to that planning, which we'll touch on in a minute. But these are the decisions that we need to think about. The other point I'll make is around this fire danger rating and our plan to leave is how long does a severe day go for or an extreme day go for? I'm really conscious that people have good plans to leave and they enact that plan. So it might be a severe day or an extreme day. They've packed up 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. They've gone off. They've gone to Doncaster for the day. We'll go watch some movies, have some lunch, just hang out at the shops for the day. But what we find is that human nature kicks in. Shops start to shut around 5. That mentality of life catches up, and people start thinking, "Oh, I've got to get home. I've got to make the kids' lunches. I've got to get ready for that meeting at work tomorrow." So people start, even though it's still hot, start coming home. Okay. History has shown in Victoria for over 100 years that all the big fires that have taken out townships, killed people, had massive loss of property and life, most of them have occurred in the very late afternoon into the early evening. So Cockatoo, King Lake, Marysville, they weren't until 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening. So you've got to have that mindset. If you have left early, don't return until you know the conditions have stabilized. It may not. So quite often when we get that cold front come through and there's fire burning in the environment, like it did in King Lake in 2009, it starts with a fire starting in Kilmore, from the north, and it ran rapidly southwards. Not a massively wide fire front, but it comes down from the north and runs rapidly south. And then what happens typically, as I talked about before, that cold pressure system comes in, the high moves out, and we get that swirling wind. And what happens is that wind changes from the north, comes around, or you might be seeing this opposite on your screen, I'm not sure. I'll do it, keep going. But it swings around to the west and then to the southwest. And suddenly that straight long fire that's already burning suddenly moves across the environment. And that's what happened in King Lake. People were saying they could see in the distance this fire rapidly moving and literally saying, oh, those poor buggers down there, I'd hate to be them. And then within hours, that fire in the environment has shifted and moved right across. So really need to be mindful about what it is to return home and what time is good. So if you've left, if you've got contacts in town, give them a buzz. Has the wind dropped? Has the temperature dropped? So forth. Another really good friend to make is the Bureau of Meteorology website. Having a look at the radar images and having an understanding of how that works, because you might sit in Doncaster and be able to sit in the food court, have a look in the afternoon and say, oh yeah, I can see that cold front coming over Melbourne. Yep. So typically hits Melbourne, we know it's going to come here, might hit us in 30 to 40 minutes. So having an understanding of what's happening with the weather, you might see that that's passed. The temperature previously at 5:30 in the afternoon was still 35 degrees. The cold front's now come through and now it's back down to 21 and the winds have dropped and so forth. And so just reading that might say it's safe to come home. But occasionally we get those stinking nights, even with the change, it might only drop a few degrees, but the wind just changes and it's still blowing a gale, and we can be, 10 o'clock in the evening with strong winds and high temperatures. Typically fires are less likely to start in the evening. It doesn't take hold as quickly, but we've got to keep that awareness going. So we'll touch on it a bit more in a second with planning, but it's, when you're planning to leave, how long are you planning to go for? Because it could be for the evening and so forth. So there are some difficulties that come with that decision. All right, next one. Okay, I've talked about that. It's the science of what the fire will do. Okay, people talked about using the Vic emergency app. I suggest that anybody who lives in this environment should have the Vic emergency app on their phone. There are a lot of ways we can find out about stuff happening in our environment. This is a few of them. Can I say that on our socials, social media, Facebook, and so forth, you might see a lot of hits starting to occur, a lot of comments. Oh, I can see smoke, there's fire burning in Warrandyte, so forth. That might be one of your very early indicators that something's happening, but don't rely on it being accurate information. Okay, same with talkback radio. Somebody might ring into Neil Mitchell on 3AW and say, yep, I'm in Doncaster and I can see smoke coming up in the Warrandyte area. It's a good column of smoke. It's black, and everyone's going to die. It's a disaster. And suddenly that scaremongering, that fear comes in. And what it is, in the end, it's just somebody having a really bad barbecue experience. So it might be an indication that something's happening. So take note. But when you start seeing these hits on social media, on talkback and the radio, go to your trusted sources. CFA website, the Vic emergency app, start listening to ABC 774 and so forth. So and then try and get that reliable information. Somebody's just jumped in the chat. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, okay. So that's a really good point, Diana. As much as the app and radios and all these sources that are out there, there's what I like to say at the start of these meetings is there's no reason anymore that anybody living in a bushfire prone area can actually say they weren't aware that a bad fire day was coming up. There's no excuse, okay? And I won't accept it. You've got a 7-day weather forecast on the TV for starters, so you can see that that's building and you're coming into hot weather. The Vic Emergency app, phone towers, power. When a fire does start in the environment, it's one of the first things that goes is power, and quite often will impact our phone towers. So suddenly our internet, power, phone service, and quite often if the phone towers are still operating and there's fire burning in the environment, everyone's on their phone. Everyone's calling somebody, and it can get congested. So I'll never put my hand on my heart in front of a public audience and say that these systems, particularly the app and so forth, won't fail. Okay, we've invested millions of dollars for it to handle it, but you've got to be prepared that some of these sources will go. So what do we do? What are the options? We've lost our power, we've lost our phones, we've lost our internet. Boom, suddenly we've lost a bulk of our information gathering tools. Go back to your sensors. So if you're still in the environment and suddenly you've lost power, because it's a windy day, it's a hot day, windy day. If it's like my life up in Dandenong, power outages were regular. You might lose power and so forth in internet. So if that happens, how are you getting your information? Well, go back to your radios, but more importantly, go back to that gut feel. Stick your head outside every now and then. Have a sniff. Have a look. Have a look around. See the environment. Is that a haze that you're seeing in the distance? Is that a smoke haze? Oh heck, maybe it's time to go. Okay. Trust your instincts and still rely on those instincts. Car radio, having a battery backup, wind up battery operated radio 774, or sitting in your car to listen. That will give you some indication. If all those things fails, you've lost your power, you've lost your internet sources, you start hearing sirens, whether they're fire station sirens, fire truck sirens, helicopters. If you hear a bit of helicopter activity going around, that's a real time to try and start gathering information. It's a real indicator that something's happening in your environment. So don't wrap yourself up on these hot days, windows drawn, power's out, and so you just, whatever you do, you've still got to be aware. So these are our trusted sites. So local news stations, the emergency hotlines, the apps. We've also got interpreter services and so forth. So there's a range of options out there. Social media. Many of you may be attached to various fire brigade Facebook pages as an example. Please don't rely on those for fire emergency information. The guys and girls will typically be out fighting the fires, and you won't be getting live or up-to-date information on those on the CFA local brigade pages. So just be aware of that. It's great for our community events and things like advertising meetings like this, and getting tips and hints. But for emergency information, don't rely on the local brigade Facebook page. The other thing I'd like to say to people is that, and I touched on it really early, is that in your environment, the fire is going to be very fast and dynamic. Okay, so when the information comes out to you via ABC radio or on the Vic Emergency app, the information may be already 20 to 30 minutes old. Okay, by the time we've actually sent a fire truck out there, a crew out there, they've made an assessment and provided information back that has to get typed in and disseminated. It can take time. With ABC radio, if anybody listens to that, particularly in the over 2009, if you're lucky and you've got the only fire happening in town, the information will be relatively reliable and timely. However, if it's Warrandyte burning, Warburton burning, Ballarat burning, something happening down Roval Way or the Dandenongs, like it was in 2009, multiple events occurring, the problem we have with ABC radio is that the moment they talk about the first township that's under threat, and they talk and list all the townships that are potentially under threat, and they finally get down to Warrandyte, and being W, I don't know whether it's alphabetical, but if it is, it could be strife. It might sometimes it was taking 20 minutes just to read out the townships under threat. So not only is that information might be 20 or 30 minutes old, then you've just waited 20 minutes for them to read it all out. So potentially the information could be 30, 40, 50 minutes old. And in your environment where the fire was 30, 40 minutes ago to where it is now can be a completely different picture. So that's just something to be mindful of. Just going to jump in the chat. I can see a couple of things here. Yeah, sorry, Diana, I've just had a quick look at that comment in the chat. I can't speak specifically for the what happened in the 2014 fires about how power and services went for that particular fire. Yeah, 774 still the official. So most of the broadcasters now will, even FM channels will, if we put it out in an emergency alert, they will break coverage and give an update. Typically, though, those commercial stations will just do the update and then go back to normal programming. But 774 has a partnership. They've got a studio actually built into our control center, where they will, if there's an emergency alert put out, they will provide updates quite quickly and reliably. But just as I said, be mindful of the delay if there's multiple events occurring. I hope that makes sense. So right now we've got an opportunity. We don't have much of a bushfire season at the moment. So now, if you've got the Vic Emergency app or look at the CFA website, now's a really opportune time to have a look at what's happening out west or north, and when we're putting out alerts and reading the alerts. So what will happen is there's an order. There's a fire in the environment. We've got to wait for somebody to ring 000 first. Until somebody rings 000, we know nothing about it. Okay, so as community members, if you're unsure, call 000 on these bad fire days. Call us, because it's a bit like car accidents that occur. Everyone's on their mobile phone or taking pictures, but everyone assumes somebody else has made the call. Okay, so if you're seeing something particularly that looks like it's threatening properties or so forth, make the call. Based on that call, and we quite often have, on the bad days, we will have fire spotting planes. We've got the fire towers operational. They may see some smoke, and it might just come out. The first message you might get might be an advice message, and it'll just say there is fire activity in the Warrandyte area. It'll be very brief, not a lot of information. That might come out around the same time that the fire trucks are responding. So we can't give you much more, but it's just a heads up that something's going on. However, typically, if a fire is starting to take hold and the fire towers or the fire spotting aircraft start seeing smoke building, anywhere around the Dandenong Ranges, Warrandytes, North Warrandyte, those surrounds, the first warning you may get is an emergency warning. Okay, and you've got to read these warnings. You've got to read what they say. Okay, and this is what I say is that at the moment it's a good opportunity to see what's happening in the rest of the state. So if you see something pop up on your phone, or when you're having a look at your Vic Emergency app and you see these symbols, yellow, orange, and red, tap into them and read them. Particularly for emergency warning, it might say something like, in the early stages, there is a fire in the Warrandyte area that may impact the town within 2 hours. If you can leave, do so. Okay. Or it might say there's a fire burning in the Warrandyte area, about to impact in 30 minutes. It is too late to leave. So you've got to understand what it's saying. So it's really good to practice, read these. As the fire develops and we start getting crews on the ground and in the air, we will add information. So to these messages, the watch and acts and emergency warnings, we might be able to give more information. So there's a fire burning on Stinton's Road, heading in a northerly direction, and will impact the township of Warrandyte in 30 minutes. And we might list road closures. As we start gathering, we can start providing more precise information. Early on, information might be scarce. So have a look at these, understand what they say. Just jumping back into the chat for a sec. Yep, great. Okay. Couple of other ones that we do add on to our mapping is evacuation. So you may also see occasionally, and it's probably might be really unlikely for the Dandenongs and Warrandyte, it will just be emergency alerts. However, if something is started well and truly to your north, and it might look like it could impact Warrandyte in the coming hours, we may issue an evacuation notice. Just need to make this really clear with people too, that in Victoria, you cannot forcibly be removed via evacuation. So whether it's the army, police, fire brigade knocking on your door, you can't forcibly be removed. In other states you can be, in Victoria you can't. As long as you've got a monetary interest in your property, which we all do have. However, what you really do need to understand though, is the moment you step off your property, we can stop you from going back in. And the reason I say that is that on these hot days, on these bad fire weather days, areas like Warrandyte, the Dandenongs and so forth will have numerous police, unmarked and marked police vehicles patrolling. So they're on fire watch and so forth. But their secondary purpose is that the moment the pager activates, they're set up with CFA radios and so forth. The moment an event occurs, they will rapidly deploy and set up roadblocks, manage traffic management points, and this will happen quickly. I went out to an area down near Bass Coast, and I can't remember the township. They had a fire in that environment, and people had literally, it was late morning, thought I'd just gone into town to do a bit of shopping and bits and bobs on the Saturday morning. Fire broke out in the environment. Nobody could get back in because the police had set up the management points so quickly. So that's all part of your planning and considerations as to what can happen. And then we've got community information. So we might have seen the pandemic announcements and so forth. With the app, I think it's what I say to people is on a typical cold, rainy, dreary, cooler sort of day, you might put the radius down to 1 kilometre, maybe 5. Okay, you don't want to know about the cat stuck up in a tree in Park Orchards that we're responding to. But on a bad fire weather day, something you're a bit concerned about, and we saw that with how far the embers can travel, I really recommend that you start expanding that area out 15, 20, maybe even 30 kilometres away. Because if you've got a strong north wind blowing out and a fire starts out to your north, 20 or 30 kilometres away, you want to know about it, and you can start making some plans around that. So I hope that makes sense. And then next day when it's cooler, just shorten the zone again if you need to. So there's also options in there to choose the type of incidents that we respond to. So you might not want to know about house fires or car accidents and so forth. So you can put filters on. Oh, I'm gonna lose my voice shortly. I'm just having. Yeah, look, I can't talk specifically, Diana, to where the roadblocks are. I'm not sure if we've got any local brigade members on, but typically they're going to be all the main, whatever you think is the main junctions and thoroughfares, they'll be set up very quickly. The bridge is one. The areas that you've talked about there will most likely be involved with traffic management points. Can I also say, oh, okay, everyone, I'm just having a quick here. I hope none of us can see anyone else's chat. Yeah, Callum, can you just follow that last one up, please? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah, so it'll be main junctions, to be honest. We all know our back roads and by roads and so forth, but we're really conscious that if there's bushfire in the environment, we really don't encourage you to try and take that back street to get over the hill or get back home and things like that. So, but part of our forward planning has to be, it's how many people work in town? Do you work away from Warrandyte during the days? If something happens, how are you getting back in? Can you get back in, and so forth? So this is all, once again, that thought provocation. All right, so that's just a bit of a timeline there. Yeah, I think I've talked about that the warnings, there can be a delay in us. I think this is an interactive one. I'll just check. Yeah, fire starts. We need somebody to call 000. It's building. We might send out that advice message. We start making proper assessments and information coming back. Okay, then you might get an emergency warning. And I've got my ugly mug on this last one, but yeah. So it can take up to 30 to 40 minutes for reliable and accurate information. So in that fire, relating back to 97, I was right in the thick of it, so I do refer back to it a little bit. But if anyone understands the basin, Mount Dandenong area, and the topography there, and you've got areas like this as well, where you've got valleys and so forth, is that the fire that started in the basin, it started in one of the valleys off Mountain Highway, and it's affectionately known as the basin chimneys. But from the point of ignition to first homes being impacted and being lost by fire in Ferny Creek, so another suburb away, we were talking 10 to 13 minutes. So when we referring this back to what emergency alerts are, people probably even haven't had their phone, the advice message come through, and they're being impacted by fire, and they're sort of saying, well, what the hell? So keep that in mind. It's quick and dynamic. So we've got Diana's talking about some 100 acres in Park Orchards and 1,000 acres in Warrandyte. Yeah, fuel loadings are being managed. CFA, yes. So like property, like household owners, we have our plans. We understand our environment. So this time from spring, typically spring onwards, local brigades are actively going out on the fire trails, understanding the fuel loadings, and what's out there. I'm not quite sure how badly a storm affected Warrandyte was. Certainly it was a disaster up on the hill, and that's going to be an 18-month to 2-year program to clean that debris up. But from an operational perspective, we drive the tracks, we check out the fuel loading, so we understand where our concerns are, and we deal with it accordingly. So some years we can't burn, some years we can. Burning off isn't always the right method. I'll just keep it simple. So we're aware of that. At a local level, it's the same with you living at home. You've just got to understand what your immediate risks are too. So I love people to be civil with their neighbours and so forth. But if you've got areas of concern around your local area, typically the first point of contact is your local council. If it's parklands, then you go to Parks Victoria and DELP and identify any areas of concern. Basing on that response, you base your plan around what's happening in your environment, if that makes sense. Okay, I've mentioned this a couple of times. Using your sensors, we get people. There's been a lot of house movement in the outer suburbs, certainly through the pandemic. A lot of house sales, a lot of new people moving into to these beautiful areas. But there can be a bit of a concern that we've got people moving into the land now that, haven't grown up in this environment, so just aren't triggered about using the sensors and understanding the environment. Getting, as I said earlier, that tingling feeling, that spider senses on a bad fire morning. It might be lost on people. So we really still encourage, keep an eye out, keep an ear out, have a sniff. If you're smelling smoke, you see some haze, maybe it's worth following up, jump online, just find out what's going on. Might be nothing, okay? But it could be something. So use those skills. If you're new to the area, have a chat to your neighbours, longer term residents, and just get an understanding of what their knowledge of the area is. Because long-term residents, they've been to a few meetings, they might have experienced a bushfire event. They'll certainly tell you weather patterns, with the topography and lay of the land. Sometimes where we've got these hills and undulations and valleys, we might be advertising, or the Weather Bureau might be advertising really strong north winds. but one that gets into these little valleys and hills and so forth, it might not be a strong north wind. It might get into these valleys, and if you're local to that area, you might have a strong crosswind, west to east or east to west. So you can only understand that about understanding your local area, I suppose. Yeah. So once again, that's so Diana's just talking about absent owners. So a lot that is an issue with Airbnbs. We've also concerned about people whose plan is to leave early, who just say, I'm insured, got everything paid for, I'm not going to do an ounce of work around my house, the thing can burn down. And then you've got your neighbours sitting next door thinking, great, you know, it's overgrown, it's disheveled. Once again, those local issues, it is a council issue in the first instance. So all if you need to follow up these, you through the council, you ask for the municipal fire prevention officer, and they will come out and do inspections and issue works notices if they deem it necessary. And if it's not, if the works notice isn't done voluntarily, then it can be contractors can be put in place and fees charged to the owners and so forth. So there is a management process there, but the council is the, you know, this is me doing the hand pass, but council is the absolute first point of call for that. Planning and decision making. How are we going for time? Okay, I'll wrap this up. I always talk a little bit too much. Sorry. Planning and decision making. We've touched on the decisions about leaving early and the ramifications that go with this. The highlights package that I'll give to you is that if your plan is to leave early and you've left early, you're leaving with that expectation that you're not coming back to a home. That's why you're leaving in the first place. I've spoken to too many survivors who have packed up, left, done the right thing, but they've said, geez, you know what, Phil? Had I known that that was the day I was going to lose my house, I would have taken X, Y, and Z. So this is the thought provocation that you need to make early, not the night before or the day of a fire or a hot day. This is what you do now. What does it look like to leave early? Have we got kids? Have we got pets? What are we doing with them? Where are they going? So we get a 7-day forecast. We can see this hot day is coming up in 3, 4, 5 days time. That's when you're on your phone to pulling in the favors from friends and family. Okay, Thursday's looking really nasty. Mate, can I bring the dog round and keep it at yours while I'm at work for the day? Or we might need to crash on the couch for a night. Or you make up a little slush fund where inevitably you might have to say, well, looks like a hotel for the night. I'm not comfortable being in that environment. So these are the decisions we need to make nice and early, not haphazard before the event or during an event. If there is a significant, you've left early and there's a significant fire in the environment, and your house has survived, which great, you've done the maintenance and given it a fighting chance, you might not be allowed back in for a few days. Purely, if nothing else, the trees, the debris, power lines, and so forth. But if we start putting in fatalities and significant loss of homes and things like that, it may become a crime scene and access just won't be available. So when you're leaving, think about identification, long-term medication, things like that, and change of underwear, some clothes, things like that, because you may not get home for a few days. They're just some hints and tips. I'm going to go past this, skip through these ones. This is just about, and I've touched briefly on it, you know, you go down to the shops, can't get home, you're working in the city, fire starts, you're at home, fire starts, kids are on the bus or getting home from school, what's the school's plan? Have a think about all those scenarios. As a parent myself, I couldn't think of anything worse than being out of town, knowing my kids are home during a bushfire event. You know, it's a disaster. So think about that. Make a checklist, make a plan. We want to write this down, not just keep it in your head. Have a discussion as a household, and you might just put a checklist that sits on the fridge. It might be before a fire, so the days leading up to. So where are the dogs going? Where are we staying? What do I need to take or pack? and then day of, then if there is a fire, you know, if you haven't left early, you know, putting on protective clothing, you know, things like that. Making a plan, yeah, do it now. You've got a bit of time up your sleeve. Not like you're busy at the moment with Christmas and everything else that's going on in life, but certainly use these coming weeks to just get that thought provocation going. Put it down on paper. In depth, if you want to look at the bushfire planning workshops, CFA. If you go to the CFA website, there's a thing where you can put in your postcode, and that will list any other further community education activities, bushfire planning workshops, community fire guards, have contact details and things like that. So that's a good source to go to. And look, they're generic, they're reasonably generic. So if there's not a bushfire planning workshop coming up in Warrandyte as such, we might be running one at South Warrandyte or Wonga Park. The information is still relatively, will be similar. Okay, one last. Diana, I'll have to check that. I believe this goes to the local brigade, to Warrandyte. So they may put it up on their Facebook page, but I'll get Callum to maybe take some details, and I'll find out about that for you. I've got a comment here also from Rachel just about best place for protective wear and for the family, and it's exactly what we're going into now, survival options if your plan fails. Okay, so we've probably got most of this stuff around. You can take all the advice that I've given you tonight with a grain of salt if you want. That your plans are your decision. I can give you the advice. How you enact it is your ownership. So you own it. What I do say though, there's no ifs, buts, or maybes, and I take no prisoners. If your decision is to live in this environment, then as an absolute bare bones basics, I tell you that what you need to have is a pair of goggles. Now, go to your safety wear places, you know, your RSEAs, Lilydale safety wear, safety type shops, and speak to them about, you know, bushfire goggles. Okay, you don't want to just have clear safety glasses and things like that. Eye injuries are the biggest type of injury for firefighters. We're in that environment. There's debris, there's smoke, there's all sorts of gunk in the environment. So eye injuries is massive with firefighters. So my non-negotiables for you as community members is a pair of these. If you can see, you can function. If you can't see and you're losing your vision, how quickly is panic going to kick in? Masks, we love masks. We know all about masks, but you've got to have masks, not the ones that we've been using for the pandemic. These need to be P2 masks they've got the filter on the front, and P2, so it cuts out the carbon and the particles from going inside your lungs. Absolute minimum, a woolen blanket, and these items need to be in your car or in a bag at home that travels with you and be available, because it might be when you're doing that grocery run on a late Sunday morning, you've been caught short, it's hot, and you come across a fire, and suddenly you've had to park in a paddock or go down to the local footy oval or so forth. But if you can see, got goggles, you can see. If you've got a mask, you can breathe. Worst case scenario, if you've got the woolen blanket, you can protect yourself from heat. It means you can function. You can still operate and make logical decisions to save your life. The next step is having what the gentleman's wearing here. Most of us will have this stuff around. It's what we do the gardening in. So, you know, solid work boots, denim jeans, cotton, natural fibers. Please don't bog yourself down. You know, a light woolen cardigan will do, but don't chuck thick woolens on, because the heat stress will kill you before anything else. Flannelette shirts, that type of thing. So gardening gloves, denim jackets. You know, it's the one time on the calendar year where you can go denim on denim, so have double denim and get away with it. And I can see you all laughing. You know, I know you are. Broad brimmed hat, because there's nothing worse than embers going down the back of your neck. It hurts and it's annoying. But dressed up like this, you can function. You can still operate. If you're caught short, you can still have the garden hose. You can still be beating out embers and trying to protect your life if in the most basic form. So have a look around. Have this stuff ready though. We don't want a scenario where Plan Z has happened, everything else has failed. Oh hell, I see smoke and embers landing in my backyard. I can't leave. It's too late. I've got the denim jacket in the drawer from 1980. I've got the boots in the shed. The gloves I think are in the laundry cupboard. You haven't got time for that. It's quick and dynamic. So you need to have this stuff in a tub, in a bag, and be ready. And test it every summer. Have it ready, because unfortunately for me, my gear shrinks every winter. I go grab it the next season and it's shrunk. So I don't know why it happens in the bag, but it just happens. But you need to try it on, and I can hear you all laughing again. But yeah, have this gear ready to go, ready to respond. Okay, we saw this in the dynamic video before, sheltering behind solid objects. As a household, you're doing, as a fire front comes towards you, first you'll get the smoke, then you'll get the embers and so forth landing around the property. You're dressed up, you've got the gear, you are trying to put the embers out. If you've got sprinklers or independent water or a hose, don't worry about stuff burning further down the garden. Focus all your water on and around the house. Stop those embers from penetrating the house. Eventually, certainly if you're in a bushy environment nearby, that fire will get closer. The embers will become more. What I say to people is, when you've got all this protective gear on, literally keep an ear out or roll up a sleeve. If you start to feel like a strong sunburn sensation or stinging, it's becoming too hot for you to be out in that environment. So the best place to be then is to take shelter, and the best thing you've got is your house. Going back to houses blowing up, they don't just blow up, they take time, they protect you for several minutes as that fire front is passing over you. Eventually, what happens is, inside the house, you are working hard, you're trying to stop fires from spreading. Windows may break, things might start catching on fire. Now, bushfire smoke won't kill you. If you've got asthma and other respiratory issues, then it's not good for you. But bushfire smoke, in essence, won't kill you. However, once a house starts burning, and it starts the plastics and all the man-made items, house fire smoke is that black, acrid, toxic smoke. And once you start getting in several lungfuls of that, you're going to be in strife. So what happens now is that the fire front is sweeping across your house. It's protected you from the hundreds of degrees outside, but now the house is starting to burn around you. Close doors behind you, try to slow the spread of the fire, but you've got to have an exit. You've got to have a couple of exit points identified. In 2009, too many people were found deceased in bathrooms, whether that was their last source of water in the bath or they thought it was the strongest part of the house. Which it is for a storm. Fire doesn't discriminate, okay? It will burn everything. So as a fire service, we don't want to see people huddled in bathrooms, okay? You've got limited access, vision, and on what's going on around. So part of the planning now for you is look around your property. Have 2 or 3 escape points that you can run to, something that's within 30 or 50 meters of the house. Can't be too far away, but it might be an earth retaining wall. It might be a bricked in barbecue area. Worst case scenario, we're talking, you might have a culvert at the end of the driveway, which you can lay down, put the blanket, you're dressed up, blanket over you. You're fighting for your life at this stage, but you've got options. You want to get away from that radiant heat. There's the famous story of the lady from, I think, King Lake Way, where she did all this and she found a wombat hole and dove into the wombat hole, suffered some burns, but survived. So but pre-planning, and I can tell you, the wombat hole wasn't part of plan A for her. That was fighting for her life. So you've got the ability now to have a look around your property and see, are there a couple of places, if we had to huddle under a blanket, it will offer some form of protection. I hope that makes sense. If you've got woolen blankets, please don't dip them into the pool or the dam or the bath and soak them, because you wrap yourself in a soaking wet blanket in that environment, the word dim sim comes to mind, steam burns will be horrendous, and is what will get you. A woolen blanket around you, if you've got sprinklers and hoses going, some residual water, not a problem, but don't soak your blankets and do that, okay? Absolute disaster. Understanding your neighbourhood. When you're driving through Warrandyte, test your different accesses in and out, understand where you take a mental note of where your ovals are, where your clear paddocks are, and things like that. We all know what's around locally, but this is also really important if we're traveling over summer and we're going to new destinations. When you're driving through, try and take mental notes of, okay, that was a footy oval back there, that was some tennis courts or whatever, just in case your new location that you don't particularly understand well, something happens in that environment, you know where there might be a clearer opportunity of safety that may exist. So in Warrandyte, the skate park basketball area is a place called a place of last resort. So that's been designated as an area where people can go to, but it's not a refuge. So you've got to bear in mind that there's no services, there's no Red Cross. You may literally be sitting in your car covered in smoke and embers. So it's really not a great option, but it's an option. The safer places, neighbourhood safer places, were really initially designed for transient people, visitors, workers who are going through the townships who had no other option. So just keep that in mind, but be aware of your surroundings. So a couple of pictures of neighbourhood safer places. Yep, being in the car, I said it before, it's not an option. 3% more chance of survival than being out on foot, okay? The top right picture there is that's embers and sparks on the roadway. Visibility is nothing, so leaving late and panicking and throwing your plans out the door and leaving late in a fire, the visibility is down to nothing. We've got branches on roads. We can see the end result up in that top left corner. There's fire trucks, there's livestock, there's everything on the roads. You can't see, don't do it. Making a plan, I've touched on that briefly. Put pen to paper. Sit down as a household and at least get some very basic ideas going as to what you're going to do. Make a checklist because, pardon the pun, in the heat of the moment, you're going to forget stuff. You will forget, absolutely guaranteed. But if you can grab that from the fridge and systematically say, right, I need there's a fire. Plan A's gone. We haven't left. Put my protective clothing on. Turn the sprinkler on. Whatever it is, get those processes going. If you've got fire pumps and tanks and things like that, practice with them. I'm sick of people saying and hearing the stories saying, oh yeah, I've got a sprinkler system and a fire pump and I've got 20,000 litres of water, but when the fire came, the pump didn't work or broke down. Well, when was the last time you used it? Well, 6 years ago. It's been in the shed for 6 years. I haven't started it. So you need to practice with this stuff. You see the guys and girls at CFA every Sunday morning going down, turning the pumps on, running the hoses. If you've got that gear, test it, practice it, and understand how it works. I'll keep going. I'm just conscious of the time. Obviously, it's a hard-hitting topic, and you know I try to put a bit of humour into it, but there's also some heavier undertones, and I can be a bit brutal. But you know, if you have been impacted, there's there's contact and help out there. You know, I hope I haven't triggered anyone tonight, but we've got to face into this as a topic. So, but there's services out there if you do need it. Little QR code there. That's sort of wrapping up the session. Certainly happy if there's any feedback and so forth. The CFA website's got a plethora of information about with leaving early templates, staying in starting to lose my words, staying and defending templates, landscaping for gardens, so vegetation management around the house. There's a whole range of things. What I also say to our community members is be connected. Be connected in with your local brigade. So on a Sunday morning, if the doors are up, pop in, say hello, have a cuppa. If this session has triggered some thought provocation and further questions, pop down and say hello, ask them the questions. If they can't answer specifically at the time, they will chase up and follow that up with you. So keep those connections. I've worked really heavily up on the hill in my local environment when the storm hit this year, and those connections between your local brigades, community response and recovery, it's really critical. So I just cannot emphasize that enough. Getting towards the end, that's it. So thank you for letting me lay all that out. It's